Well, it is time. It is time. It is time. We are 50 days or less away from every D1 men's college basketball team out of 363 getting their season going and finally giving me a break from having to watch college football. Now, in this series of videos, it's going to be a mixture of analyzing the roster, analyzing if the transfer portal moves will be successful and do they fit the need of the program and that program's coach, and what I see as betting value in the first 1 to 3 or 4 games for each team. So we're going to start from the bottom of the alphabet. We're not going to touch on Yale just because I'm not an Ivy League guy. So I'm going to try and stay away from the Ivy League this year. We're going to start with Youngstown State. This is a team that definitely had to reinvent themselves from and he's going to definitely play his role as a second unit player. So with Chucky Hepburn coming back, with Matt Keesmith there, Connor Essegian, like there's a lot of scoring there for this Wisconsin team. What they need is good bench play, and that's what they're going to be able to get with AJ Storr coming over from St. John's. So let's move it along. As far as a game that I like early on in the season for Wisconsin, I think that when you look at Robert Morris and losing Enoch Cheeks, that's a team that's like definitely liable to get beat up pretty bad. And Wisconsin, they're not going to schedule a game at home that they think that they can lose, because we've seen them have a couple slip ups in the last couple years. I think that this is going to be Cupcake Central. If you can get Wisconsin at a 17.5 to 20-point line, I'm all over Wisconsin against Robert Morris in the fourth game of the year, especially after coming off playing Tennessee and Providence in consecutive games. Okay, so let's have a look here. Move on to Winthrop. I'll make this pretty brief, because Winthrop is definitely a team that, with Mark Prosser coaching, let me down as far as tempo and consistency with style, but that also had to do with Michael Anumba being injured and out of the lineup. I think this year they've done a really good job of adding some players that are going to be able to make a difference offensively, leadership-wise, and bring some experience over from being the top dogs on other teams. And I'm talking about Nick Johnson from New Hampshire and Alex Timmerman from Bucknell. Now, they are going to have to do a lot more running. Timmerman's a guy that's done a lot of scoring with his back to the basket, and Nick Johnson can score from all over. I do think that along with Kason Harrison and Sincere McMahon, you're going to have a good stable of scoring guards for Winthrop, guys that are smart, guys that are ready to freaking play that team basketball, share the basketball. And I do think that Winthrop is going to be a little better than they were last year. Obviously, I want to attack them in games that they're playing quad 4 teams. That's where they probably have their best value. And I have to look at that early game against Holy Cross as a game that if I can get them at under 10 points, I'm going to want to bet on Winthrop. At home, they're probably going to be more easily able to push the tempo. And with all that senior leadership, these are guys that are coming back that want that NCAA tournament appearance. And to win the Big South Conference, you got to be deep, you got to have good guard play, and you got to stay healthy. So I think that with Winthrop, they've answered the two question marks that I had with them going into the season. Can they find a capable big man to give them some rim protection? They did that in Timmerman from Bucknell. Can they bring in an experienced guard that can handle the ball and take on a hefty load of the scoring duty if Anuba gets injured, if Kason Harrison is ineffective? I think that this is a good pickup for Winthrop. And I think that Mark Prosser has a very good group to work with, and he will look bad if this team doesn't succeed. So we'll move on from there. Let's talk about William and Mary and Dane Fisher's group here. Now, I think that when it comes down to it, William and Mary didn't really add anybody that I find very interesting. Now, people will say, well, you brought in Trey Moss from South Florida. You brought in Caleb Dorsey from Penn State. Well, I think that in both those cases, those guys were in situations where they had to leave because there just wasn't an opportunity. For Caleb Dorsey at least, you are going to play with your brother Gabe, so there's something that attracted him. And with Dorsey, I think that he brings good length. He brings good freaking versatility when it comes to scoring from all three levels. He does a good job of rebounding the basketball, and that's what you're going to really need on this team. William and Mary definitely struggle to limit the possessions of their opponents, and being able to bring in a kid like that who's going to have instant chemistry with his brother, that makes a big difference. As far as them being successful in the CAA, I'm not really sure about that. I think that they're a middle of the pack type team. They don't really have a challenging schedule. And I think that the best teams to get against them are going to be those quad one, quad two games. When I look at their size up front, Noah Collier definitely leaves me with a lot to desire. And if he can average a double double or better, then he'll surprise me and shut me up. But outside of that, I'm not really sure how these transfers translate to William and Mary. Obviously, going down in quality and capability makes a big difference in having better output. But I think that with this William and Mary team, they just don't provide a lot of confidence to me, and I'm just having problems saying something nice about them. So as far as looking at them early on in the season, I think that their game against American at home, that's probably their most winnable game in the first 4 or 5 games. Outside of that, maybe their neutral court game against Lindenwood could be good for them. But I think that this American team is definitely a team that they can get over. And if it's a short number under 3 points, I'll definitely be on William and Mary. Okay, let's move on. Wichita State. Now, this is a team that had to do a whole bunch of stuff on the transfer portal. They brought in, I think, 4 or 5 players, and I think that there's a couple good ones. When you look at what they brought in Harlan Beverly from Miami, who's going to be instant quality defender. Scoring wise is going to leave a lot more question marks. They brought in Jacob Germany from UTSA. Germany obviously is almost a 7-footer, a guy that can score with his back to the basket, a guy who can be the focal point of the offense if needed, and a guy who's going to give you probably a double-double. I do like the acquisition of Ronnie DeGray from Missouri. I watched him at Missouri. I think it was at UMass before. So he's got a big body. He can definitely make an impact. And I do think that if he is still on the roster, he's going to supply some good offense. Now, for Wichita State, it's all about what type of defense they're going to be playing. If this team can defend, then this team is going to be great for full game unders. I think that against teams that they're going to beat and blow out, you're not going to see a lot of games that get into the 145 range. I think that when you see 145 and under with this Wichita team, you're in a good spot. Now, the one thing that people will say to me be like, well, chosen one. Paul Mills is the coach of this team. He coached Oral Roberts. You saw what they did offensively and tempo-wise. Well, I also saw them play some pretty good defense last year. So I'm not afraid to say that Wichita will play to the strength of their roster. And when it comes to the bench, they're going to need a guy like Xavier Bell and then like a guy like Bijan Cortez from Oklahoma to really provide some offense and some good rebounding. If they can't, then this Wichita team is going to benefit from slowing games down and not playing the way that Oral Roberts did. I expect this team to be very good defensively and very efficient offensively. So obviously early on in the year against a team like Western Kentucky, who's replacing a lot of key parts, it's a good spot to beat up on. Or a team like Coastal Carolina, who comes in your fourth game, but you play them on a neutral court. So I'd be a little more hesitant to jump all over that. But if I see Wichita State at like 7.5 to 10 points, I'd be willing to take them as a favorite against the Hilltoppers. So we'll see. But I do think that Beverly, Jacob Germany are going to be impactful transfers. And Paul Mills did a good job of getting and attracting those guys. All right, let's talk about Dwayne Stevens' Western Michigan team. This is definitely a Western Michigan team with some experience in B. Artis White and Titus Wright, the big men. But, it's just what do you have after that? And that's the big problem for Western Michigan. on the transfer portal, they did only bring in one player, but they brought in a quality, experience, impactful player from Northern Illinois and Anthony Crump. At 6'8", he brings some good size. He can rebound. He can defend. He understands how to beat up on some of these lessers in the Mid-American Conference. And I think that he's going to have a big opportunity. When it comes to Javonte Brown, the Torontonian from Thornley, I just have not seen him play. And at 7 foot and highly regarded as a 4-star recruit, I expected to see more from him. He's not going to have much competition as far as getting on the floor, because I do think that with him and his perimeter game, Titus Wright and him are going to be able to share the floor easily. I think that with Max Burton, he's a guy that can show up and really steal minutes from Javonte Brown if he can. But outside of that, it's a very unproven Western Michigan bench. I do think that that will be the Achilles heel to this team. And I think that against any high quality opponents, I'm looking to bet against them. So when we're talking about their game against Northwestern in the third game of the year, or their fourth game of the year against Ohio State, if I see under 25 points, I'm going to be definitely intrigued to bet against Western Michigan, just because I don't see where they're going to be able to get 60 points a game from. I just don't see it. So Western Michigan is not one of my favorite teams going into the year. All right, let's have a look at Western Kentucky. Now, Western Kentucky has a coaching change. No Rick Stansbury there anymore. They brought in Steve Lutz from Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, so the fall off probably won't be as bad as some people anticipate, like myself. Obviously, they did a hefty job on the transfer portal. They brought in Jalen Jackson and Taryn Murdochs from Corpus Christi. They brought in Rodney Howard, a 6'10", experienced big man from Georgia Tech. And they brought in Babacar Faye from Charleston, who could be a surprise offensive contributor because he's very good at running the floor and scoring in transition. I think for Western Kentucky and the style that Corpus Christi played last year, that does suit them. So they've done a good job of plugging the holes that they had. I think that the biggest hole that they had was who's going to be the go-to perimeter guard scorer aside from a guy like Dante Allen, and that was their acquisition of Brandon Newman from Purdue. We've seen Brandon Newman play his best. We've seen him at his worst. He needed a change of scenery. He needs to be the focal point of the offense. I expect him to start at the 2 spot from day one, and I expect him to be the focal point of the offense. The way that he rebounds the basketball off his own misses, the way that he crashes the board off corner threes, he's not afraid to mix it up. I think that this Western Kentucky team is going to have some good ball handling, and they're going to be able to get the ball to him in lots of good positions. Now, I will say this, like every other time I've talked about Christian Lander in his college career, I love the hair. I don't love the quality of basketball. If he can step up and man up, he can be a big contributor for this team and give Lutz some extra depth that he doesn't have right now. I think that when we look at this Western Kentucky team, I expect them to be an underdog in about 6, maybe 7 out of their first 8 games that they play against Division I opponents. And I think that against teams not named Wofford, they could be losing a bunch of these games. So when I look at the Wofford game, it's obviously the most attractive one to me. I think that they're going to steamroll Wofford. I think it's on a neutral court, which will not help Wofford. I think that the Hilltopper faithful will travel more. And I think that when you have all this experience, you're not playing an underclassman on this team. There are no sophomores. Everybody is experienced. I think that that leads to better performances, especially on neutral courts. So Western Kentucky definitely, in some games, I'm going to be looking to bet against them, but in some other games, I'm definitely going to be betting on them. So let's move it on. There's only 8 more teams to talk about, so not that much longer. Probably another 20 minutes. Okay, so Western Illinois. Now, they only brought in two players. One player, Drew Cisse from Missouri St. Louis at 6'10, but only 217 pounds. Not really impressed by that. Not really impressed by the other big man that they brought in from Illinois State and Joe Petrakis. I don't think that either of them are really going to be contributing in a high way. I think that this is a team that is going to have the size to throw out at you, but I do think that those guys like KJ Lee, like Tay Knox, they're going to be more successful in this Chad Boudreau offense. And I think that with Western Illinois, there's a lot of reason to be looking to bet against them with how much they lost from last year's team, how many impactful scores. There's a lot of question marks of who's going to be handling the ball when, who's going to be taking those last shots. And from my perspective and from my numbers, I just don't think that they've done a good job of filling those voids that they have to warrant being a bet on team. So I definitely will be looking to fade them. I don't see them being a favorite in any game except probably their game against Southern, where they may be a 6-point favorite, and I'd still be looking at Southern. So this is definitely a group that I'm not looking to get on, and I have very low ranked. I have them ranked at 339. So speaks for itself right there. All right, let's talk about Justin Gray's Western Carolina team. Now, this is a group that definitely has some interest to me. When we talk about guys that they brought in, like Kamar Robertson from Mercer, Cornelius Williams from LSU, Charles Lampton from College of Charleston, these are guys that I think that can have some reasonable impact. I think Kamar Robertson's going to be a double-digit score for this Western Carolina team. He's going to really have the reins taken off of him, a little more freedom in the offense to get what he wants to do done, which is get into the paint, break down a defender, pull up for a freaking mid-range Jimmy, take it to the bucket and get to the line. And with Vontarius Woolbright, with Russell Jones Jr., with Trey Jackson, there's going to be a lot of open looks that he's going to get. And if he can nail those things, he's going to be one of the more impactful transfers in the Southern Conference, and especially, obviously, for this Western Carolina team. As far as betting on or betting off them, I don't really see a spot early on that I really want to jump on them. I think that against Notre Dame, depending on what that line is, if that line's 4 points or less, I'll be all over Notre Dame in the second game of the year versus these guys. So Western Carolina may be able to surprise some people in conference, but I want to see how their bench develops and what they're going to be getting production-wise out of there. Because if they're a team that really has to rely on that core four guards to really dominate the scoring, well, what's going to happen when one of them get into foul trouble? What's going to happen to one of them when they're ineffective and they have to go to the bench and try and change up what they're doing schematically and tempo-wise? So I just don't see a lot of proven contributors off the bench that I would hope for. And that's the problem with college basketball right now. All of these Power 5 teams are rating these mid-major teams, and that's really causing a depletion in quality bench players. And Western Carolina is not immune to it. All right, let's talk about West Virginia. Now, obviously, West Virginia, no coach, Bob Huggins. However, I still see a very competent team and a better team if they can get Eastern Michigan transfer Noah Farrakhan a waiver to play this year. Now, they basically had to reinvent themselves, and that's clear as day to everybody else. But they're going to be solid defensively. They're going to be efficient on the glass. They have some guys that can really dominate, score the ball, and they have a good ball handler. Now, Kira Kiralisa coming over from Arizona should be a focal point of the offense, but playing in the Big 12 is going to be a step up than playing in the Pac-12. I think that with Jesse Edwards getting out of Syracuse, playing a more fluid offense where he has a little more opportunity to run and dunk the ball where we've seen him do it masterfully, I think that's going to be a big acquisition for West Virginia, and they're going to really enjoy him even with the loss of Trey Mitchell, which him and Trey Mitchell could have been a very dominant low post tandem. Raekwon Battle from Montana State, he's going to be a big contributor. I think that he's going to be the leading scorer for this team. He just has so much break you down, break your ankles, pull up, and freaking hit a cold-blooded jump shot. I just love his game. I love how he's developed. I loved him better at Montana State, but with the coaching change, you knew that he was going to try and step it up because he wants to try and get drafted this year. Aside from that, a Cook, my former UConn and Georgetown player, he's over there, so he can always give you double digits and do a good job defending and rebounding. I think West Virginia did a very good job of rebuilding this team. The question obviously is going to be, do they have that instant chemistry from day one where they play Missouri State? I think that as a favorite, I'm going to be a little more hesitant jumping on them, but it's going to be based off opponent and on a game-to-game basis. So for me, against Missouri State in the first game of the year at home, I'm looking to see if I can get them under 10 points. I'd be willing to take them. So, and another thing, West Virginia, they're going to be better free throw shooting with this group than they were last year. So we'll see what happens. Okay, let's talk about Donald Copeland's Wagner Seahawks. Now, obviously with Wagner, this is a team that didn't really have to do a ton of stuff on the transfer portal. They brought in some players, but nothing that you're going to freaking just run home and freaking get orgasmic about. That's the bottom line that I can say with Wagner. When you look at Wagner, they went out and they got Churchill Bounce from Central Arkansas. They got Teron Allen from Monmouth. They got DeAndre Howell South from St. Francis, Brooklyn. And the impactful transfer that they got is Zay Blake, 6'1" junior scoring guard from Green Bay. Can't blame the guy for wanting to get out of Green Bay. It was a pretty brutal situation. And I think that he falls into a situation and a conference and a program where he's going to have a lot more ability to take over games, weaker opponents to dominate, and less big men to have to go up against. I love the combination of Raheem Moore, of Zaire Williams, and Zay Blake on the perimeter. They all can go and get theirs. They all can pass the ball. They all can hit the mid-range Jimmy. And with Blake on the three-point line, you're going to open up a lot more lanes to drive for Moore and Williams. Now, as far as Teron Allen, I do think that he has the ability to be a 10-plus point per game scorer for this team. He's going to play starter minutes. I'm just not sure because I haven't seen him do it yet. So outside of him, the bench is where the real question marks are. Can Rob Taylor and DeAndre Howell South provide that next level scoring? Can they provide that relief defensively and on the glass? And can they avoid fouling unnecessarily? Wagner at times was undisciplined. I look for them to be more disciplined in another year of experience playing under Copeland. So Wagner's going to be a good team in the NEC. I think that the games that you really want to target them against are obviously quad 4 games. I'm not looking to bet against them in the first couple because Fordham and Rhode Island are going to be difficult tasks. But when they have that game against NGIT at home, their first D1 home opponent, if I can get a line that's 5 to 7.5 points, I'm all over Wagner like that. So, but I will say this. In some of the early games, I don't expect them to score 60 points. So if you're looking at totals and you're looking at an under or taking a chance on an under without a lot of data, Seton Hall, Fordham, those are two teams that can get very defensive at times, especially if their own offense isn't dropping. So I'm going to roll with that. NGIT as under 7.5. Yeah, that's probably a good number right there. If you see 10, I'd be a little more hesitant. But this is going to be a good defensive Wagner team, and offense is going to be their problem. All right, let's talk about Steve Forbes' Wake Forest Demons. Now, with Wake Forest, obviously bring Yao Uka and Matthew Marsh and Hunter Salas, Efton Reed. You know, they've done a really good job of supplementing their scoring off the bench. What I'm most impressed with is fucking Boogie Miller, Central Michigan scoring guard, Kevin Boogie Miller coming into the fold. I think that this is a guy that, even though a lot of the projection sites don't have a high opinion of him, I think that he's a much better scorer and will be able to score similarly to other Wake Forest transfer guards into the ACC. I really like this Wake Forest team. I think that they're a very quality bet on team, especially as a 17 to like 22 point favorite. Cameron Hildreth, he's going to be looked on. He's going to be looked upon more in the offense than he was last year, but he's a very competent guy to give you 12 and a half to 15 points a game. He's a good guy to bet on DraftKings also. Andrew Carr is going to have more offensive responsibility this year, and Matthew Marsh is going to have to really play those supplemental minutes and give you that rim protection and that stout defense that we've seen him in past seasons and at Jacksonville. I think that obviously the X factor for Wake Forest is going to be Demario Montesanto with his 3-point shooting and his ability to get red hot. He could be the leading scorer for this team. And I just think that there's a lot of upside to what they have. They have a lot of guys that can score on their own. They have a lot of guys that can share the basketball. And I just think that with the amount of ball handling guards that they have, it's going to be a tough defense to really lock down on. So Wake Forest, they're going to be a bet on team for me this year. I'm looking at getting on them on the road and neutral court games against Utah and Georgia early on in the year. I think they're better than both of those teams right now. And if the line is short, if the line has a plus in front of it, you know, I think Wake Forest is going to win both of those games. So, you know how I feel about Coach Mike White. I'm not a fan of him. I think that he's going to choke in his home opener versus this Wake Forest team. So give me some Boogie Miller. Give me some Utka. Give me some Cameron Hildreth, even though he's a flaming redhead. But the chosen one, he loves Wake Forest this year. So Wake Forest is definitely going to be eating. That's one. All right, let's go over to the Pac-12 and Mike Hopkins. Listen, he's done a fantastic job of bringing in capable, experienced, well-fitting system players to what he's going to do. When you start off with a guy like Paul Mulcahy, you get him onto the West Coast. The problem with him is he does want to handle the ball a lot. The question is going to be, can he score the ball with his jump shot? Savar Wheeler coming over from Kentucky, him and Keon Brooks are going to have instant chemistry. I think that's going to be the 1-2 combo that really gets this offense going. And then I think that Moses Wood coming over from Portland, he's an experienced guy. I think that the projection sites are way off on him. I think he's going to be a critical, impactful transfer, even transferring up. He's strong. He's lengthy. He can score from all three levels. He doesn't need a lot of space to get his shot off. He's a guy that really gets me excited to watch how he's utilized by Coach Hopkins. I think that with obviously bringing in Anthony Holland, having good size with Frank Kempiang and Braxton Mee, there's no weakness of this Washington team. I think that the one issue that I'll say is, who's the guy that's going to score the ball from the deep perimeter with limited time on the clock? Is that going to be Keon Brooks? Probably not. He's more of a mid-range scorer. Probably going to have to rely on a guy like Anthony Holland. But if you're up to me, I'd be drawing a play up for Moses Wood. Love that name. Love that player. Love his game. All right. 2 more teams, and then I'll close this off for the Y's and the W's, and then tomorrow I'll do another one with another range of teams starting from the bottom of the alphabet and working my way up. Now, Washington State, coached by one of my favorite coaches in college basketball, Kyle Smith, is a guy that did a reasonably good job of refilling after losing some key pieces on the transfer portal. I think that with this Washington State team, they're interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what a guy who I talk shit about on the regular, Joseph Yesufu, can do in the Pac-12 because he couldn't do much of anything in the Big 12. And then Big Sky transfer Isaac Jones, who put up some massive games last year. And I think the projection people are just really not understanding what a quality player he really is. And in a system where Kyle Smith knows how to get his big men into the best positions, I think that this is going to be very interesting to watch this Washington State team play. I think that they are going to have to play a little slower because they don't really have a ton of natural scoring guards height wise. When you look at a guy like Jay Mullins, he's 6'6", but he's going to be playing the 2 guard. And then a guy like Andre Jakumovsky, who's going to have to stay healthy, he's going to be playing probably the 3. I think that this team is going to give you trouble if you want to go in. They're going to have all that length and all that wingspan to really deter drivers and those pull-up jimmies and all those floaters. It's just going to be a tough team to score against. I think Washington State's going to be best when you're talking about betting on their totals. This is going to be a top 50 defense, in my opinion. The question is going to be, what are they going to do offensively? And I think that with their size, length, they're really going to be able to move it side to side, and they're going to be able to really dominate teams that don't have the height to compete with them. Back to the basket, clear the side out, and let somebody go to work. So Washington State is definitely going to be a bet on team for me. I cannot wait to watch this Pac-12 team, and I can't believe I'm actually saying that. But the chosen one loves this Pac-12 team. I think they're going to be big favorites in a lot of their games early on. That's why I think betting unders is probably the best way to do. I don't see them giving up 70 points in the game until conference season. So maybe the Santa Clara game, they give up 70 points. Maybe Boise, they give up 70. But when you look at Portland State, when you look at UC Riverside, when you look at Utah Tech, these guys are not going to fucking trouble Washington State. The question is going to be, how much is Washington State going to score on these guys? So I think Washington State is going to be a team early on in the season that scores between 72 and 75 points. And if they can exceed that, then they're going to cover a bunch of favorite spreads. If not, it's going to be ass clench city. So betting totals and betting on their opponents not to be able to score against all that length and wingspan is probably the better betting endeavor. All right, last game that I'm going to talk about, that is going to be Weber State out of the Big Sky with Eric Duff leading this team. I think that this is a good Weber State team, even though they didn't really bring in anybody that gets my heart pumping hard off the transfer portal. I think they're going to be very starter oriented. I think that starters are going to be big, are going to play big minutes. And I think that the biggest thing for them is to avoid injuries. When you look at their starting 2, Dylan Jones and Steve Verplanken, these are guys that can give you fucking 35 to 40 points a game. They're going to get that much kind of usage. And Dylan Jones, with how much he scores off rebounds, that's going to be even better. They're going to have to play, I would probably say 30 plus minutes a game easily between the two of them. And really, Weber State's success is going to depend on what they get coming out of a guy like KJ Cunningham, who's a good 3-point shooter, who hits his free throws, a guy like Dyson Kohler, a guy like Alex too at 6'11", all that they really brought in from my standpoint is Arnaud Ravaz from Maryland. He's going to play minutes. It's going to be a question, does he play 10 minutes? Does he play 15 or does he play 20? I think Alex too is a guy that can average a double-double. I love his back to the basket. I think that the one area that just kills me with him is just his free throw shooting. He's a terrible free throw shooter. And if he can't hit free throws and Ravaz can, you're going to see a switch when it comes to the rotation. I think that Weber State, if they can play slow, if they can use that size that they have on their roster to really play rock'em sock'em type games, Fred Flintstone style, that they could be okay. I think that their game on a neutral court against Gardner Webb, if you see them as a 3-point favorite or less, that's a good number to me. I would like them up until 6.5, just because I know that with the way that they rebound the basketball, they're going to score and get to the free throw line. The question is going to be, if it's Alex too, can he hit his free throws? Um, Outside of that, I do think that their first non D1 opponent, St. Mary's, if they're 11 to 14 point underdog, I'll be fading them. I think St. Mary's is going to keep them under 60 points. And I do think that St. Mary's will be better offensively than they were last year, even though they were very competent and capable. When it comes to St. Mary's, they're definitely a team that I want to be betting on often when it comes to the spread and the total. Having Mitchell Saxon, Alex Dukas, Aiden Mahaney, and fucking Marcialonis still in the fold equals boom, 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 good times. I think that St. Mary's may be one of the best defenses in the nation, and they'll definitely easily be a top 50 offense. So looking forward to betting on St. Mary's and fading Weber State that first game, and then betting on them against Gardner Webb. Well, that is all the teams in the Ys and the Ws, excluding Yale, because obviously I don't want to mess with that. And I'll probably be back with another video tomorrow, because I know that I have some free time to do one. And that's about it for me. So, transfer portal, chosen one, and I'm out. Take care. Have a great one.